This is TPG Live. Welcome. I'm Jeremy Horn, also known as the Product Guy, and we're just about to get started. Whether you're just starting out or leading a global team, this is your stage. From startups to Fortune 500s, interns to CEOs, everyone's voice matters here. TPG Live isn't just a show, it's a conversation. Whether you're on camera or off, you're part of shaping what happens next. Drop your thoughts, questions, and hot takes into the chat room. I'll bring as many of them into the discussion live and in real time. Today, the on-camera portion of our roundtable is joined by Jordan Bergstrom, a product leader with over 2 decades of experience in B2B enterprise SaaS. Jordan has led product efforts across industries ranging from facilities management to healthcare tech. He's led leadership roles that utilize core service channel and metadata solutions, and now works as a head of product/product management consultant. With an MBA and master's from Boston University and certification in pragmatic product management, Jordan brings a passion for market and customer discovery to drive revenue. We're also joined by Kelvin Wilson. He blends deep expertise in product innovation and engineering with a background in R&D across automotive manufacturing, data, and insights. He's previously led roles in technical operations, product strategy, and implementation in the tech space, and is a 2-time technical founder with experience in early-stage startups and venture acceleration. Currently the founder and CTO of AdSense, Kelvin is also an advocate for responsible innovation and digital inclusion, serving on the Internet Society's Ghana chapter, their standing committee for research and policy. And finally, Drew Falkman, a product consultant with a sharp focus on 0 to 1 strategy. Drew has helped launch and lead products for companies like HP, Adobe, Geico, AARP, and many more. He built the product strategy practice at global digital consultancy Modus Create and has founded or co-founded 5 startups throughout his career. As an instructor on platforms like Maven and LinkedIn Learning, Drew teaches on topics including AI, product strategy, data analysis, and customer insights. Today, he coaches and consults with product managers, teams, and founders, helping them navigate uncertainty and drive meaningful impact. Today on TPG Live, are enterprise products evolving beyond traditional engagement strategies? As product leaders, managing relationships with both users and buyers presents unique challenges, especially when their priorities don't always align. And how can product leaders address the dual challenges and vast complexities of hybrid work environments while still creating sustainable success for both customers and teams? We'll explore balancing team autonomy with accountability, fostering collaboration, and how to keep everyone focused on a shared product vision, regardless of location. Join us in the chat room and at the roundtable as we discuss all this and much more coming up next on TPG Live. Before we get started, quick reminder. You can support The Product Way on Patreon and enjoy some amazing benefits. For less than the price of a coffee, and you know how I love coffee, you'll get access to real-world PM strategies and case studies, tools designed to help you solve your toughest challenges and elevate your career. Looking for even more? Higher tiers unlock exclusive benefits like one-on-one mentoring, resume feedback, shoutouts, and priority access to premium resources crafted for product professionals like you. So join us at patreon.com/theproductway to support the show and keep the content you love coming your way. Now let's get started. Your go-to platform for all things product management, connecting you with industry leaders, trendsetters, and a global community of insights and unique perspectives. This is The Product Way. All right. Everyone, thanks for joining today. Welcome to another show of TPG Live. Jordan, Drew, Kelvin, anything in the bios there that you wanted to change or update? Or clarify? Did I make any mistakes?
No, it was pretty good.
Awesome. I like being pretty good. All right. So the question of the show today is, what's the most used tool in your PM toolkit? So I'm going to just start in the top right on my screen, and I'll start with you, Jordan.
Oh, okay. So my favorite tool is actually a battery of questions that I leverage to explore product opportunities, to really get at, what it is that my customer base is doing as part of just, their world, and to identify opportunities for my, company to, drive new revenue opportunities potentially by, really looking for like a whole new areas that we are not yet addressing. So questions, that are in the vein of, hey, like what are your current company level goals, department level goals, things like, what would make you a hero to your boss, or a hero to your peers, to your employees? What keeps you up at night? What is your boss constantly asking you to deal with that, that's bugging you, and that's why you're being kept up at night? And then, some of the this one's a little classic, but how do you measure success? Is it metrics? And that's common, but also, is it opinion based? Is it just your boss's opinion? And what does that maybe look like to you? And or is it something that is unfortunately very hard to put your finger on? Like, do you feel like in the reality, like your success is being measured by, I don't know, something like your height, and it's out of your control? It's just a battery of questions that I throw out there, because my objective in these kind of questions is just to get them thinking very broadly, very, very big picture, and also get them thinking outside of like the boundaries of the existing product, right? These are not questions about the current product at all, because I don't want that like classic feedback that's like, well, can you fix this thing about the existing product, right? That just leads to iterating on the existing product. And hey, that feedback's great, but that's the kind of feedback I'll naturally get all the time. That's the easy feedback I get. I'm always out there trying to figure out, hey, like, how do I create a whole new product opportunity and category? So those are my favorite tools, because they lead to discussions that might lead to new revenue opportunities.
Do you have those things published anywhere?
Not out in the public domain, but I can certainly make them available.
Actually, if you share them to me, I can drop them into the description after the show.
Sure, I'm happy to share them. No problem.
That'd be great. You're great. Drew, let's go to you.
Great. It's tough. It's tough to say. I mean, I'm not a day-to-day product manager, like where I'm running a product at current. So I'm helping a lot of other companies. So what I use every day varies a lot, and it depends from client to client. But I think one of the biggest time savers that I've found lately, that I've been using a lot, because almost always I'll be doing some form of customer research. And one of the things I always hated the most about customer research was getting all the insights out of it. But I've been using Notebook LM lately by Google. And that is just so amazing. You upload essentially all of your data, and then you can talk to your data like it's ChatGPT. It has all the context and awareness from Gemini, basically. But you can it's only actually on your data. So you can ask it to do stuff, and it can create user stories. It can create a PRD. It has a little mind map that it generates, if you want, that sort of maps all the sort of topics that came up. And even when you ask it things, it's very intelligent. It'll actually have little links to where it grabbed the information from, so you can go and do it. And then, like, a fun thing is it also has like a podcast. So you can generate this. It's two people talking, and it sounds just like a podcast about your data. So you can kind of put that on, and then you can download it, and you can just listen to it at some point in time. And it's like two people talking about all the stuff. And they'll be like, what's interesting is, we found this, and, John so-and-so said this and such. I don't know how helpful it is. People can kind of listen to that. I know, I really like the tool.
Awesome. Let's go over to you, Kelvin.
Well, my most tool use is Google Docs. Well, it's not the most glamorous, but that is where strategy takes shape for me, and the story sort of gets clarified, and the messy thinking becomes clear thinking. It's the space where I get to sort of slow down and reflect before I bring others along with me. I think in this role, clarity is a gift, and Google Docs is where I find it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So for mine, so when I started thinking about what's the most used tool in your PM toolkit, I decided to go not with something you can hold or download. I decided to go with for those who know me, something annoying, poking, never satisfied. It keeps me asking, wait, but why are we doing this? Instead of just moving on, the tool saved me from many bad decisions that any roadmap ever than more bad decisions than any roadmap ever has. So my tool, I went with curiosity. So that's
Right.
that's the way I decided to go this round. If you're joining us in the what I call the off-screen roundtable part of the roundtable in the comments, please post questions throughout the show. Share your tool, what tool PM tools you like. Also, ask questions during the show, and I'll work them into the conversation. So with that said, let's jump into our first topic. Our first topic, it's all about customer engagement, bridging the gap between users and buyers and enterprise products. And so let me kind of throw a little bit of a toss up. We'll see if anyone wants to answer the question. If not, I'll call on one of you. And so my first question is, what's been the biggest aha moment around the disconnect between buyers and users? I saw Jordan thinking.
I mean, sure. There was a little silence, so I'm happy to jump in silence. So I run into this all the time, and they are exceptionally different. The buyers in my world, and I've been in the enterprise world a long time, usually are the more senior people in the organization. Because they are the decision makers. They are the ones that are ultimately, at the end of the day, going to make the call as to whether they're going to purchase your offering or not. And as the more senior people in the organization, they definitely have a very different set of needs, objectives when it comes to the product itself. So they're thinking about things like business intelligence and information and decision making and portfolio level decision making. So they're looking for to, like, let's say, log into a product and see dashboards with actionable intelligence, and they're thinking about now AI and opportunities for predictive analytics, and what is all the data that I'm sitting on tell me, and how can it direct the portfolio of responsibility that I have in ways that will allow me to operate my business more intelligently, while the users have a very different perspective, which is much more transactional, we'll call it, where they're much more like hands-on, every day-to-day transactions, moving through the product in a much more like moving a particular just entering data into the system, and that being very quick, very easy, very fast, and getting the same transaction done really, really quickly. So they're probably much more interested in the usability of a particular transaction being really, really quick, and that's important to them. So it's almost like different parts of the product. So the point of this is that when you're talking to these different audiences, you're going to get very different levels of feedback about completely different parts of the product potentially. So you could be pulled in very different directions when you're talking to these different audiences about what parts of the product to focus on. Now, I'll be honest, okay, I've always definitely leaned into your buyers, right? Because they're your decision makers, and you want to keep them happy, because when it comes to the end of contract life cycle, they're the ones that are going to decide whether, they're going to stay with you. Now, one other thing to obviously keep in mind, part of their decision making is going to be going to the people that are using the product day in, day out from a transactional standpoint and asking them, are you happy with the product? So you cannot ignore the users of the system and just keep the buyers happy. So both need to be happy, because the buyers, the decision makers, will certainly be asking the users how they feel about the product and should we continue to be using this product. But if your buyers, your decision makers are not happy, then you're done. Like, you're cooked. And if they don't see value in the product, then they're in a way, to me, exceptionally important, because they are the decision maker.
Drew, do you have anything you want to add to that? Drew, you're muted.
My to not be loud while other people are talking. Yeah, I think it depends so much on the organization and the app. I think there are some instances where, the buyers are much closer to the actual users. They might be direct reports or something like that. So they see the results and they hear the results from the users. Whereas in other times, the buyer might be like a VP or something, and all the people that are using it are, a couple levels removed. And those tend to be the trickiest, I think, in enterprise applications. I mean, there was one app that I worked on a few years ago. It was a banking app, and we had worked, typically we worked with the buyers, and they had very specific needs they wanted in terms of how they wanted data to be entered and stuff. And what had happened was the company, before we came in, had sort of listened to that, and they were trying to build something to facilitate the buyer. And in the end, the user, they didn't like the way that things were designed. They just wanted things to look like a spreadsheet, because they're bankers. So like Excel, that's their game, that's their jam. Like, they feel comfortable if they're in Excel, so make it more like Excel. So, that's kind of what we did, and make it more like Excel, the interface that they worked with. But then you have to make sure to have some kind of reporting in those instances, so that the VPs can see and you understand clearly like what their goals are, and they can see how the software is driving to the goals. And if you have those kind of things, so that sort of oversight, I think that can help a lot to sort of diffuse the difference between the people that are actually on the ground using this and the people that are buying it because, they're looking to increase efficiencies or productivity or processes or whatever it is.
Yeah, that line between the buyers and the users can really get blurry. Kelvin, how do you define success when a product has to serve both the end user and the decision maker?
Oh yeah, Jeremy, I think this is an interesting build-up, because if we are going to talk about success, then I want us to look at value. In enterprise, of course, we are not just building one product. We are sort of building two value proposals into one product experience. Of course, the buyer and the user. And this creates that fundamental dilemma. And I don't think this is a new problem. This has been the existential thing with enterprise solutions, basically. First off, I want to think of my buyer as a user on the journey who has actually cleared at least one check, so that we guide the user, this particular buyer or user persona, to clear another check to the next cleared. But I want to think of the other user as our potential buyer, whom we are now about to guide to become a buyer. So we can't also put our user aside like that, because then we can have a very connect between the user and the buyer, because eventually over time, the user becomes a buyer. Good. So when you build for just the buyer, of course, you get shelfware, you get a software that is purchased.
Can you elaborate
on
that one for me a little bit? What do you mean by the user becomes the buyer eventually?
The user becomes the buyer eventually because the user is at the point of adoption. I think of the user and the buyer on the product journey, that the buyer has already cleared a check already. That is why we are calling the buyer a buyer, but the buyer is an existing user or somewhat a user who has sort of a paying for the service. So then
Well, isn't the
we want,
user
mhm,
an engineer?
yeah,
Like,
the
let's
user,
say I buy, I'm the buyer, I'm the CTO, I paid for Jira,
yeah,
and then I've got engineers and product managers using Jira.
mhm,
They're not going to ever really become a buyer.
of course, yeah.
What's the scenario that you're thinking about?
The scenario is if we don't put so much we don't put focus on the user, then we end up losing the buyer because the user is very important to the buyer's existence in that enterprise too, basically. So what we have done technically is sort of run dual discovery tracks for the customer side and the user side, sort of aligning those particular interlaps, basically. So in practice, what we do is we sort of run possibly dual buyer discovery sessions about 6 to 8 weeks with stakeholder updates and needs and goals to sort of update the needs and goals. And then on the other hand, we run user discovery sessions, possibly weekly or bi-weekly, watching workflows, capturing friction, running experiments, using a mix of full story and mixed panel to, uncover user frustration signals because we want to learn those signals and package those in a report and serve those to the buyer, basically. So this is how we have looked at it on the technical side, but we try to complement that with an inclusion angle because we want to study those dormant users who are also not responding to also, understand because some of the underutilized features, we use them as signals, not basically failures, because they may just be overbuilt for the power users. Yeah.
Gotcha. Jordan, how do you define success for user, for buyer, decision maker, end user?
Uh, yeah, success, I guess, on the buyer side is a little easier because you could simplify it as they continue to make a buyer decision to continue to purchase your product, right? That's the simplest way to measure that. Now, just in the enterprise SaaS world in particular, that doesn't necessarily mean they're happy. That they could easily continue to buy your product and be miserable because the switching cost is so painful that they can hate your guts and still continue to buy your product time and time again. I've worked in companies like that where the customer's miserable, yet they refuse to leave you because it's so.
I've been that miserable user.
Yeah, I mean, happens all the time. So there are that isn't the best metric for success is revenue especially in the enterprise world. But it's not a terrible one because we're all out there to make money. So that's not a bad one. But don't just rely on your revenue as a gauge to how good of a job you're doing as a product team. I would look at other things like the basics of NPS and just simple conversation with your customers about how are you doing out there, and are you successful with the product, and is it meeting your needs, and the basics of that. You asked about the user level, so that gets obviously trickier because it's not that it's a multifaceted question. It's that in the enterprise world, the product usually is so large that the answer probably is it depends on the part of the product, right? So ask them about part A and they love it, and part B they don't. So it comes down to in the macro, are they happy? Yeah, you want to get at that. Again, I'll lean back into NPS isn't such a bad way to do that, right? Net Promoter Score. Sorry for those of you that aren't familiar with NPS. That's Net Promoter Score, and
Or those who don't like it.
And some people like that. Don't. The nice thing about it is it's a simple question, right? NPS all comes down to a simple question, which is, would you recommend this product to a friend? Okay, and that's why people like it, because it's such a simple question with a simple answer to get at the idea of, is the product decent, good, great, right? Like, and that kind of now. Also, that metric also is only valuable over time. It's not an interesting metric unless you compare the values as time goes on. So take that with for what it's worth. So user level success is is trickier than I think the buyer level success, because you want to ask a lot of different questions, ranging from various parts of the product, and it's not just looking at talking to the users themselves. Of course, you could look at data that's coming directly out of the system. If you have good tools like Mixpanel, you could look at things like that to sort of gauge, to look at certain parts of success when it comes to usability, right? So there's that as well.
So, but when I'm thinking about defining the success of a product, do I care about the users, or do I just care that it's success to the revenue, and the revenue is just the buyer?
Well, like I said earlier, I just want to jump right in there, is you don't want to just look at revenue, because that can be not predictive of where you're headed, because like I said, people can stick with a enterprise product simply because the switching costs at this point in time are so painful that they won't do it. But in a year from now, when a new product comes out that makes the switching costs a lot easier, they'll leave in a heartbeat, right? So if you're not paying attention to the fact that deep down they hate your guts, okay, that easily can become a quick problem when a competitor comes into the market space that makes switching easier than it is today. So don't just rely on revenue as your sole metric, for exactly that reason, that competitors can come in very quickly without you knowing about it, and steal your lunch.
Drew, do you have 2 cents you want to put in?
Yeah, I think a lot of that was accurate. I think that the last point is key. I mean, it's important. One of the biggest challenges that I see on software teams when I come consulting is there's sort of this translating like what your company goals are down to work to be done in the engineering team. And like the company goals, are usually like more revenue, more, better customer lifetime value, and these sort of big level things. And then how do you translate that? Even if you shorten the time frame and you shorten the numbers you have to go to into like a quarter, how do you then translate that into like smart goals that are actionable that the team can work on? And I think that's a real challenge, actually. I think because you can drive these numbers, and it's important to have these goals and this overarching vision, but how you translate that into actual work and like what everyone's spending their time on day to day is a critical task. And I think there's a huge gap there, quite frankly. I think the companies that have very skilled people, but there aren't a lot of tools that make that translation very well from strategy to sort of tactical. So I think it's a good question to ask and to think about for companies and for product teams as an exercise,
So as you kind of tackle what you're describing, like you're getting feedback from users, you're getting feedback from the buyers. How are you balancing that different feedback?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of like a real world example to shed light on that. It's one of those things. It's such this is the funny thing about product management is you talk about these things in the abstract and they seem real simple, but then when you sort of get when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it seems like a simple problem, but it actually is quite challenging because you really are balancing two very different things, right? Your revenue, like Jordan said, you can have customers that are very happy. I think of like EHR systems. My wife has a clinic. She's a physician, and these electronic health records, they call them, or EMR, electronic medical records, they're just like the most nightmarish software tools ever developed. And it's so ripe for disruption, that whole area. But as Jordan also said, once you lock into these things, changing from one to another is a total nightmare. Nobody wants to do it. And when people do it, when clinics do it, it causes complete disarray for like 6 months. So, you can have miserable customers and still be hitting your numbers, but at some point the dam will break, right? Like at some point someone will come up with an easier tool to migrate your software into, or someone will come up with some feature that is the sort of camel. And so you have to be aware of these things, and it's important to have context of the market when you're listening to all this stuff. And you have to keep your users happy at the end of the day. Your buyers too, but your users they can't be pulling their hair out, because they will eventually leave if they're unhappy.
Kelvin, what do you do to balance the different inputs you're getting from the different personas here?
Well, it's interesting. I think it's an interesting from the point Jordan mentioned about also paying attention to the user, basically. So we try to integrate our sales, our customer side of the process, to our product side of the process. So we have sales to products to customer success to loop closure, basically. So I want to think about our customer engagement. Customer engagement is not a single team on its own. We try to embed it cross-functional through the technical team, that is the product team. So the sales uncovers the promises made by the buyers, and the product translates those roadmaps commitments. But the product team has also already uncovered the user insights, basically, because that is our work. The insight we get from the customer side is the intel sort of insight from the stakeholder side, basically. So inside that particular loop, we are able to embed that customer insight into the user insight. And then from there, customer success monitors the adoption, and then, sort of, and the other surface friction, basically. And then marketing, on the other hand, takes the win story. And then we close the loop, and then the loop begins from sales again from that particular point. And that's how we just try to, integrate it to the whole process. Yeah.
Gotcha. So I want to do a toss up for this one. See who wants to tackle. What's your approach when you've got users, they love the product, but the buyers aren't convinced, or maybe even vice versa?
But Jeremy, help us out a little. Why would if the users are loving it, why would the buyers not be loving it?
Of course.
Let's see. What could be so? It could be pricing. It could be maybe there's just lack of trust between management and the employees, and the employees are like, oh, we need this. I can think of a scenario where maybe there's a new technology that maybe people want to be using. Management's like, hey, our stuff is good enough. I'm trying not to answer the question myself.
Right. No, those are good examples. And okay, so I mean, those are good examples, and those do happen in the real world all the time, especially pricing, or management thinks exactly like what we're doing is good enough. We don't need to switch, because sometimes your champion, right? Your champion within the organization you're trying to sell into is only a user, not a decision maker. That was your in the first place, right? They were sort of at a user level, not even a manager, just a user. That was your in. That's how you got in. And then you're trying to work your way, up the chain of command to the VP, who's the decision maker. And they can look at it and say, everything's fine. You're too expensive. All the things you said, all the above is the problem. And I guess your question is, how do you combat that? And there is no magic bullet to combat those things other than, as a sales organization, value, right? You have to really promote the value of your offering through mostly the lens of money, right? The best thing you can do in that scenario is show them the money you can save them, and how that, like, on an order of magnitude, okay, that the cost is an order of magnitude less than what you will save them. And if you're, a sophisticated sales organization, you have calculators that can show that. You plug in a couple of metrics that are inputs to this calculator that based on, let's say their volume of work, right? You plug in these volumes of work, it spits out the fact that, well, based on the fact that you are this many employees doing this many transactions a month, we cost you $1,000 a month, but we'll save you $10,000 a month. And then hopefully you have enough information to back that up, and it's not just fiction. That's the best thing you could do. You really want to convince someone at a high level to buy your stuff, and they're a little incredulous. I'd say that's the number one thing to do, because money talks, right? You want to convince someone at a VP level to buy your stuff. Show them how you're going to save money, and that's number one, in my opinion. Right? That's the first thing I would focus on is dollars.
Who wants to add to that?
Interesting, Jeremy. So if the buyer is able to identify value already, then our work as product leaders and product workers is to find that value for the user. And if the user has identified that kind of value that the buyer isn't agreeing to, then our work is trying to sort of bridge that gap. I think it brings it back to the topic about bridging the gap between these two, personas, basically. So if the buyer has identified value, then the buyer knows reasonably the price is okay, or maybe something about the offer makes sense to, as a good deal, basically. So then we want to find a way to know a workaround in that particular space, try to use the users as a case study, and we'll learn from the users basically. And that is how we'll be able to close that gap basically, because we need to still find value. So I think value is the fundamental missing thing here, because we still need to find value for the user, and we still need value for the buyer too. So then if the user is saying, hey, thumbs up to this systems and we love it, then we really need to get the buyers on board. And that is what we need to do as product people. I think it begins with learning. Yeah.
Drew, do you have any tips for how you build relationships with these different groups? Like when you have a product that's where you're just dealing with the users, you can instrument it, you can track it, you meet with them. Like what about when you've got users, but then you have buyers, and the buyers maybe you're just never even interacting with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, that's interesting. The company that I've just been working with lately, we worked with them. So we started, because they weren't having much conversations with these, and they weren't actually separating them out. They were looking at the companies, but they weren't actually breaking out the user and the buyer, it's an important thing. But some people kind of overlook it for whatever reason. So we sort of help them to do that and sort of reinitiate conversations with the buyers just as buyers, and doing user research. And what we found was that, first of all, in order to talk to anyone, we had to go through sales, and it took forever. It was like not a simple process. So one of the things that I recommend to any product team is to work with sales so that you can create customer panels and have them, if they do it right, it helps them to deepen their relationship with the customer as well, where they can reach out and say, hey, look, we're trying to improve this product, and we want you to be part of that conversation. As a buyer, we want to make sure that you're getting the returns and that we know what's driving you. And so I think setting up a customer panel, both of users, which is helpful, and of the execs, which is more difficult because their time is more valuable and they're harder to schedule. But if you can find some that are
myself, I've done training with the sales organization on how we can collaborate and we can kind of maximize both of our return in those relationships, and what kind of questions to ask and how to manage it. Just my 2 cents there, but let me hand it back to you.
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing to do. So I highly recommend that. And the other sort of side to that, and this isn't a direct answer to your question, but it just, in terms of this topic, I think it's important, is a lot of times when you find there's a disconnect between the buyer and seller, if you look further, what you might find out is that they're actually not, it's because you're not focusing on your ICP, right? Your ideal customer profile. And also, a lot of companies aren't even setting an ICP. They don't know exactly who their ideal customer is. And when the sales team doesn't know that, and the marketing team doesn't know that, everyone in product, we learn this because we end up getting the squeeze. Because what happens is, if you're not aligned with your sales team, then sales is selling something. They're either trying to bring in customers that aren't, that their your value proposition doesn't meet what they need, or they're just not, all kinds of things can go wrong. So if everyone's aligned, if you work with sales and marketing and product to all be aligned on who your customer profile is, and so you're bringing in that customer and you're building product to better serve that customer, and you're marketing the value proposition to that customer, you're more likely to have that alignment, and you're able to sort of have that buyer and seller and understand what their needs are and be meeting their needs. So I think the targeting piece of it is really important from an executive level.
What other advice for establishing or building these relationships?
In terms of the panels.
Well, I was throwing it out to Jordan. I was throwing it out
Yeah.
to Jordan and Kelvin to add to what you were just saying.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I picked Jordan.
Yeah. Oh, well, no, I'm a huge proponent of advisory boards, especially in the B2B world. I've been running them in pretty much every company I've ever worked for, especially in the B2B world. Huge believer in them because I think these high touch engagements and conversations are critical. And they're valuable. It's different in the consumer world, but in B2B, absolutely very valuable. If you take your 10 smartest, and smart is an important word, your 10 smartest customers and meet with them on a regular cadence, it is incredible. It is amazing how much you can glean by meeting with them. I used to do it every other week. Have a meeting where it was a standing meeting, and I'd invite anywhere from 12 to 15 of my smartest customers with the hope that about 8 or 9 of them would show up each week. And it was all designed to do two things: for me to bounce an idea off of them, to take their temperature on the value of that idea, and give them an opportunity, being them being my smartest customers, for them to bring new ideas to the table that they have, their problems, their new problems, bring to the table. And then we discuss as a round table of, hey, great idea. What other customers think? And if there was some level, I'm not going to say consensus, but if it felt like there were 6 or 7 other customers in that group that agreed that problem had merit, okay, like then that's traction, right? And it warranted, we'll just say, further investigation. And I'm not going to go into what that means, because that's a hour-long conversation of how that gets pursued. But yeah, I mean, massive opportunity there. Now, there's a side benefit to this too, that is a soft-like benefit, which is, and I can imagine every product manager on the planet can appreciate this. Every customer, by the nature of them being a customer, thinks that they are the only show in town and will ask for everything that they want and never stop asking, okay? Because that's just their job, to just keep asking. When you take your 12 biggest and loudest customers typically, and you put them in a room with all the other loud customers, they very, very quickly learn, oh, wait, I'm not the only customer of this business. There are 11 other smart, just as loud, just as engaged, just as, Do
they really learn that?
They absolutely do. They absolutely do. And if they don't, that what that means? That means they're just unbelievably selfish human beings. And I've yet to come across that human being okay, who's willing in that room to be that person. Now, outside of that room, they may be that person, but not in that room, which is nice. Okay. What they do privately, I get. Yeah. And they privately might be a pain in the butt, but it still does help for them to know they are not the only customer of the business, and to be regularly reminded of that every other week. You'd be shocked at how powerful it is for these customers to be reminded you are not the only customer of this business is really good, because they get like, there has to be a certain level of democracy when it comes to the roadmap. Like, I can't just serve you all the time, because that's just not feasible. And I found that to be very helpful to just remind them that there are a lot of customers this business has to serve.
That's good. And you also, if I remember correctly, I think you gave a talk through the mentorship series on advisory boards. I'm going to see if I can find a link and drop that into the description as well. If you know where it is, send it to me. Otherwise, I'll spend some time to see if I can dig it up, because I know that was a great talk you did there.
Yeah, I did. I'll look as well.
Kelvin, this next question to you, and then we're going to kind of wrap this up, I think, here. In that, what sort of trends are you seeing shaping how we approach enterprise customer engagement over the next few years?
You're on mute, Kelvin.
There you go.
Okay, okay. So I think the future of products will be customer, because products will be leaning more to from where I started from technical products, where I grew up, where I actually learned design strategy, where I grew up in the product field. I haven't worked so much with the customer side until quite recently, and it is very interesting how empathy has gotten into my work personally, because I'm getting to get close to the customers themselves and hear from them. Quite recently, I heard from one of, not necessarily a customer, from one my startup that I'm building now. I just had a feedback from the user, and he was like, hey, this thing really helped me. And, from that particular day, I just wanted to, keep hearing from, a couple of some of these users. So I think the future of products will be human, basically. And I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah.
And Drew, what trends do you see shaping how we approach enterprise customer engagement? And you're going to need to unmute yourself.
It's interesting. I think, I mean, I hate to say I know AI is like all the hype, but.
Wait, what is this thing? AI?
I just, I can't help but see that it's going to radically change how we approach these things. And in some ways, it's going to be
really. I can't do a show without talking about AI anymore.
No, you can't. You can't. I mean, it's everywhere, and a lot of it's hype. I've been playing around with a lot of these tools and stuff, because I've been doing these courses for LinkedIn on them. And, the code hallucinations, and, there's some goofy stuff that's still happening. But I think when those bugs get worn out, there's going to be, the potential for what it can do is going to be very powerful. Like the idea of, like, take these sort of like Lovable, for example. The whole idea that these internal ITs are building these custom internal software things for the enterprise, it's going to be gone. People can make an app for themselves to do something that they want, and it'll be productive for them to do it, and it won't take that long. So there's no reason for engaging IT and having a budget, and that's going to have an effect. And I think, there's this tool called Strela that I was playing around with, and what you can do is you can create like an interview, and then recruit people for it, and then it will automate it. So you actually don't have to be there for the interview. They talk with AI, and then it analyzes it and gives you insights from it. So you can essentially go, and it'll even do like follow-up questions using AI based on the context. So you can say, I want this many follow-up questions for this. And they even have like how you want the follow-up questions to be formatted. So you can do like 5 whys, or you can do OARS, and they have these different sort of structures. It's actually really cool. I recommend it, Strela.io. And then you automate it, and then all of a sudden you've done 15 interviews, and you didn't need a UX researcher. You didn't have to sit there on all those calls. You don't have to go through all the transcripts and find the golden nuggets. Like this stuff is going to save time. It's probably going to cost jobs, quite frankly, and it's going of how product is run. But I think at the end of the day, that aspect, I'm not sure, like what we were talking about earlier of like filtering down strategy into tactical. I don't think AI is ever going to handle that. It can help maybe, but it's never going to handle that. So I think there's going to be a place, but how we sort of apply ourselves and the actual work that we spend doing, we're going to spend less time writing stories and sitting on these calls and things. But, you know, I don't know. It's going to change things a lot, and I'm not sure in all the directions, but it's going to be fascinating. I'm seeing it already. These tools are outstanding.
Yeah, Lovable came up last month as well. It creates apps from prompts for anyone didn't see the last show, and if you didn't, why not? I'm going to wrap up this topic here, and we're going to go into our trivia segment. For the trivia segment, listen, talk amongst yourselves. Talk about the trivia. Don't say the answer. Don't type the answer if you're in the off camera. Don't type it if you're in the on camera. We'll get to the answer after the second topic, but for now, let's see today's trivia question. The role of product manager was first introduced at what company? Once again, the role of product manager was first introduced at what company? And for bonus points, what year? All right, so there you have it. The role of product manager came from where? And if you're feeling fancy, came from when? So we'll get to all of that. In the meantime, let's get to our second topic of the show today, which is about hybrid product management, overcoming the challenges of mixed work environments, working fully remote, working remote and in person. I guess maybe we can kind of start somewhat simply, and just are any of you currently any of you are working remotely? Are any of you working hybrid? Are people on your team in either?
Yeah, I'm still working hybrid.
Yep, I'm remote.
Yeah, I'm remote too.
So what does it mean? So what does hybrid work mean for the product team? How has it changed? And since I already gave you the floor, Jordan, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it so long now, almost 10 years. It's become incredibly normal. So now I'm thinking back to like the impact it's had on me. Of course, relationships, you know, and I think we all can appreciate the difference it has, you know, on us when we're trying to be humans dealing with two-dimensional entities rather than three-dimensional entities. No matter, I think, how hard we try, it's not the same, you know, level of just emotional attachment to the 2D that it is to the 3D. When you're, you know, physically present with another human being, we have an attachment that we cannot compare to a screen. I don't care what anyone says. If you can attach to someone the same way through a screen that you can when you're in their physical presence. I admire you, and you're also probably a little weird. Take that for what it's worth. I'm just not that person.
I feel attacked.
Yeah. Okay. You should. I can't bond with a person the same way through a screen that when I'm, physically with them. But my prior job, we were, sometimes, we were in the office some days, and then other days we were remote. So, not so unrecently was I doing a little bit of both. So I quite recently had that difference, right? Like sometimes we were together and sometimes we weren't. And there's a difference, those meetings were different. But the upside is, that's why I think hybrid is the nice mix, because you have the opportunity to be together, to build the human connection while still having that opportunity to not have to commute all the time and waste time commuting all the time, right? Because I do believe in the efficiencies we get by not commuting every single day, wasting our time commuting every single day. I'm a believer in that as well. But now that I'm back to being 100% remote, that's had an impact on my ability to have the same level of relationships that I did prior. So that is a challenge that needs to be, that requires energy. It does. It requires energy.
Gotcha. Looks like we might have lost Kelvin. Let me go
Yeah.
to you, Drew. Same
All
question.
right.
I think I offended him and he just dropped off.
He just got sick of it. He didn't like it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I've been remote for a long time, and much as I cannot stay, I live in Los Angeles, so the thought of having to commute is like dreadful to me. Like there's people here I know, they spend 2 to 3 hours a day just on their commute, and that's that's not living. I mean, that's just such a waste of time. It's just a lot time you could spend either working or with your family or having fun or doing something else. So I agree with that, but I do agree with that point that there is no replacement for that sort of in person, and I think there's a sense of trust. I was doing a startup for a while, a couple of years ago. I had like a Web3 startup, and one of my devs, he was in Costa Rica, and he was great. But I have no idea how much time he spent working on my app. I have no idea, and the way that he left, like I know at the end, he definitely was not spending 40 hours a week for the last couple months, and he may have had other jobs. I've heard of situations where, people are hiring people and then they find out that that person had other like allegedly full-time jobs. So they're taking like 2 to 3 full-time jobs and just doing their best to get by in each of them and get a paycheck. So there's like a trust issue, I feel like, with this whole thing. You don't really know what people are doing, and you don't want to have them in meetings all the time, because when they're sitting here, they're not necessarily getting any work done. So, it's hard. The accountability piece is very hard when people aren't in the office. So I get that.
Maybe they were just swapping out sun time for the wasted time they would have had in a meeting anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible, So
Kelvin, same question to you. What does hybrid work mean for you, for your product team? How has it evolved?
Oh, well, that is interesting. My first team I led was a hybrid team, but I worked in an on-site team inside of production before I got to lead in product. So my first shot at product was around 2018 thereabouts, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic thereabouts. So with all honesty, it wasn't an easy one. It was like overwhelming all throughout the whole show. So what happened is you can have about teams across 3 time zones. You have Slack messages crossing midnight boundaries. You have engineers on deep focus. You have designers on calls. You have PMs chasing clarity. this certain the real product challenge here is no longer ideation or execution, in my opinion, because I think what I found was orchestration. Orchestration became the actual work I was doing as a product manager, because um, what I was doing initially was chasing after the team for feedback, and that was what was overwhelming. So I decided to step back and look at the hybrid environment as a design problem of its own. And that was how I sorted everything out. Yeah. So I think coordination and clarity comes very important when we talk about hybrid environment. Yeah.
So, building on that one, Kelvin, what do you are you do? What do you do? What are you doing to help keep everyone aligned on strategy, priorities, especially with a distributed team?
Interesting. Okay, so what we learned from what happened, because we actually learned from failures. We we didn't have anybody to teach, well, me that how to handle hybrid teams. I just had the opportunity and I needed that, and I just had to figure out a way to make it happen. So what we did was we tried to find a way to build trust from clarity through our decision logs, basically. So basically, what we did was a short doc for every key trade-off, decision, contest, and from my experience, these serve as basically living memories for people or newcomers joining the team and late joiners later on. So that when half of the team is, they start working, and the other team is half asleep at a different time zone, we can be assured that intent will be to, like instruction there, basically. Yeah, this is something we actually had to pay attention from, I wouldn't say very hardcore metrics, but from a very human perspective, we took notice of some of these things and we realized some of these activities, push the line in there. So in practice, with the decision logs that was created, I intentionally designed these decision logs. With these decision logs, it served as a guide and a shared understanding for everybody anywhere you are, for us to then have a groundwork or a foundation to begin building trust, so that when you say what you want to do, you do it. And when and you can also be able to sort of disagree in the open, healthily, in a respectful way. And you can also communicate intent and not just action, because this is how just we try to figure out the alignment. So I think when we run with this, we realize the product vision was surviving the silence, and I wasn't sort of checking with everybody again. Feedback started coming in because everybody was owing the duty to themselves. I like to think about my team as a crew on a ship. So I feel like everybody owes it to ourselves to make sure we don't sink. So we keep that on our radar. So I think hybrid in itself, like I said, was a design problem. So you have to get questions like these on your radar. You have to be concerned about what your team, into brackets, now they are the user, because it's a design problem. What is your team trying to get done? Number one, what is getting in their way, and how you can remove that friction, how add clarity. Yeah. With this approach, this is just internal. I'm not sure I was supposed to say this, but this is our formula strategy. Basically, we implement it all around. Yeah.
So we've got decision logs. Jordan, what other methods or tools or approaches do you use to align everyone around strategy, around priorities?
Yeah, I mean, overall, it's required more, unfortunately, documentation, less just conversation, just by the mere nature that you're not
That sounds like it could be a good country song right there.
right, or which would result in the inventor of agile rolling over in his grave, which could also be a country song. Yeah, it just is what it is, because when you're not together, it's not as easy to just be reminded of things by walking over to someone, right? There's more friction in conversation when you're not together. It's just natural, right? You're not as inclined to send a message, pick up the phone, whatever the means of communication. There's just a natural friction. So it's required in more memorialization. So, and I definitely feel that there is a need for strategy purposes, like you said, to keep people aligned, to remind them of what our strategy is more frequently. Because, back in the day where we were all in the same office, we could put the strategy up on like a whiteboard, right? And it would be in the office. And as people walked by it, they could almost be like unwittingly constantly reminded about what the strategy as a business is by walking by that board. Every time they walked into the office, they'd see it and like consume it, whether they wanted to or not. And that was actually kind of great and healthy and not a bad thing. It was a great thing. That's sort of like not really feasible. I mean, you could sort of post it on some, board that everyone looks at on their computer, but that's not realistic.
Not his name.
So yeah, just things need to be documented more, more reminding, more pushing of these things, and an active reminder at the beginning of, so for example, each, kickoff meeting, a reminder of why are we doing these things? Why is this sprint look like the way it looks? What is the rationale, the business driver, the problem behind all these features we're about to build, and regularly just, reminding anyone in the business that's, part of all this, why are we doing it? What's the alignment, behind it? Yeah, just constant reminders is necessary, because people will forget very quickly because we're all busy. And it's easy to forget, why are we doing this? What was the reason? And, and sometimes whether we like it or not, sometimes these things get asked for by one customer and we do it for one customer, which we all hate, but sometimes you do it. And the classic question, who are we doing this for again? And that's fine. It's for this customer and this is why we're doing it. They insisted, and great. And yeah, hey, it's not the best use of time, but in the hybrid world or the remote world or whatever you want to call it, yeah, that's become way more and more necessary, which isn't fun. And that's the downside of it, is that level of communication, the regular reminding of, hey, here's the why. Here's what we're doing. That whole why. Yeah.
But can we just talk about like meeting hygiene? Like, I feel like that's something that's so important in this day and age when there's hybrid and remote teams.
Well, now you don't need to have hygiene in meetings, right?
I'm not talking about cleanliness. I'm talking about whether you're wearing pants or not. Like, I don't care about that. But like, just do we have everyone in the meeting we need to do whatever we need to do? Is there anyone in the meeting that doesn't need to be here? Does this meeting need to be a meeting, or could it just have been an email? Like, I feel like these are just super important questions that I feel like in the remote day and age, everyone's very quick to just slap up a meeting or pull up your scheduler and grab a half an hour of your time. And then, but it's not always necessary. And it's not, the flip side is like, we have to meet. We're missing that like water cooler talk. We're missing the like, hey, I'm just going to walk over. I've got a quick question for John and I'm going to ask him. We don't have that anymore. So it's not as easy. And, but there's a right time to Slack, and there's a right time for a meeting, and there's a right time for an email. And I feel like it's really important to get those straight and to like spend the extra 10 minutes before you put something together to think about exactly who you need to be there and why each person needs to be there, and do they each need to be there. There's somewhere they did a calculator where you could calculate like how much a meeting cost. Oh, yeah. And it's like crazy how expensive a meeting is. When you've got too many like VEEPs in a meeting or something, you're just like boiling money away. It's crazy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've seen that calculator. It's scary. It's scary.
It is.
And it does. It makes you think a little bit when you see that number. Like, yeah, right. Is this meeting worth $1,200?
Yeah.
Maybe not. Or, right, do I need all 10 people in it? No. I'll take people out. But you're right. Oh yeah, we over invite people because we want to be inclusive, right? We don't want to leave anybody out. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. But one of the rules I have is I don't accept meetings without an agenda. If it doesn't have an agenda, I'll just immediately decline it. Like, that's my rule. And if it's rude, I don't give a crap. Like, if the meeting doesn't have a purpose, why am I coming to it? Right? Like, sorry, like what that sounds too heavy-handed, tough. And people, but I tell people that in advance, I let them know that's like my rule up front. But yeah,
Jordan keeps missing all the birthday celebrations, the surprise meetings.
Well, no, if the agenda is birthday celebration, that's all you got to say.
You can't say that.
And then I'm in. That's a great agenda. That's all you got to put in the agenda.
It's a surprise.
Is we will get drunk and I'm all in. But yeah, like
what about the tools? Are you using the tools in the meetings or asynchronously, like separately from the meeting? Is it just to talk about stuff, or are you putting Jira up or whatever?
I mean, Miro, I think like those boards, I love those things, Fig Jam, Miro, whatever. I think those are super valuable. And you can have them. What's cool about them is you can do them asynchronously. You can do them together, and there's like purposes to both. So you can kick off a conversation. I just had a meeting with a client today, and they're battling with, kind of per our question before, is like their executives use EOS, if you've ever used that, Entrepreneur Operating System, and their dev team uses Agile, and they're finding that there's a conflict. And so they're trying to figure out how that is. And I can't solve that problem for them. That's between, they need to figure that out. But we're able to like create one of those boards and, isolate kind of the friction points and start brainstorming on them and start asking questions. And now that conversation can sort of continue asynchronously on that board, or, people within that can log onto the board and have a meeting and collaborate on it, or everyone can get back together again and re-collaborate. I think that those tools are super helpful for this kind of remote work.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to you, Kelvin, for this one, because we kind of started this loop on these decision logs. And so I guess my question to you is, are there other processes, are there other tools, methodologies that you do to help that also help build trust and kind of sense of ownership, credibility across this hybrid product team?
Of course, Jeremy, when you go to the very first point, when I talk about when you say what you do it, we talk about accountability basically. When we are in the team for the very first time, we are trying to pay attention to our individual actions, the small little commitments we make to ourselves basically. So these are sort of the validations we actually use to, keep ourselves synced up. So we try to run insight throughout. We don't get on meetings for meetings' sake. Our meetings are discovery sessions, strategy sessions, and insights basically. And then when we get to our discovery, our decision logs, we just try to back it up with those mentality of trust and communication. And besides that, we don't really use any particular tool because the team in their environment with the developers are working through their systems. Designers, of course, using Figma, we are able to keep track of the time loops. When documents get updated, we have a culture of updating the last updated, who updated it. We have a little set of small instructions that we intentionally follow, that we join the team for the very first time. That is what we talk about. This is how we do our thing right here, and this is how we want to get it done. And there is a learning gap to get it done, basically. So we try to create that safe space for the new member to find a way to help us get that particular thing done, because it hasn't been 10 years for me managing hybrid teams. So I'm still trying to get my stand on things very well, because this is a system we had to sort of, through failure, build it basically. So I'm also trying to be, particular about which structures to be moving around basically. Yeah.
What about, so when you're dealing with trust and credibility, I think one of the things that you hear a lot of, especially when you hear about places like Amazon, etc., saying like, hey, if you're not working in an office, you're not in person, you're not getting promoted, there's decreased um, there's decreased career progression. Like, what do you do to help make sure that remote team members, they don't feel left out of these important conversations? What do you do with respect to career? I think I asked an overloaded question here, so feel free, anyone, to take any part of that. And since Drew's smiling, I'm going to him.
All right. Yeah, I mean, this is a challenge, it really is, because it's always like people who are on site are always way more visible. They're going to, and like Jordan said, you can't, we are humans. We aren't virtual, avatars, right? We're hard coded to make connections with people we actually meet. And so when you meet in the office, you create those relationships. So it's hard to, when you're talking about promotions and stuff, and if there's two people in the same position and the job above them opens up and one of them's in the office and one of them's remote, I mean, that other person probably has a better relationship with whoever's doing the high, whoever's the senior person. And that's just a reality of just being human. But, I think in terms of trying to make that fair, the way we always looked at it, when I was at Modus, we were a remote company, and this was before COVID and everything. And we had people all over the world that we worked with, and we had an office too. We had a couple offices, but we always thought of it as like, we're remote first. So whenever you set anything up, you always make sure you set it up so that it's handled remotely. Like if you're going to do a meeting, then you do it you get the conference room and you get a Zoom and you get all the remote people on as well, so that they're always included, and you're doing it sort of on Zoom, or sometimes even everyone will be on Zoom on their laptops in a room that's there, but everyone's essentially in the meeting, but some people are sitting next to each other, but they're all in the same meeting. And I think that can help a little bit, because it sort of makes sure that you're always including the remote people, but it's tough. That relationship piece is going to be a reality.
And Jordan, who is nodding, you take it.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. I don't know how we can, realistically say the playing field is going to be equal if you are a remote employee and you're trying to compete with a on-premise employee, and you're going to pretend that you're on even playing field. So I would say, like, if you're you and you want the playing field to be level, do your best to, if you say to yourself, yeah, I just don't want to be in an office anymore, go work for a company where everyone is remote. That way the playing field for you is level and you're not at a disadvantage. If you're the type of employee that loves to be in an office, okay, all the time, great. Like, then go to a company where everyone is, in office, and then the playing field is level for you, and everyone is, on a level playing field. Just that way you don't put yourself at a disadvantage. And think through that. Don't expect, because we're all human beings, that it's going to be level. And look, if you are a manager, I will say to you, try to do your best to recognize that if you're comparing a remote employee to a in-person, that there might be some subconscious things going on there. Try to do your best to level set the comparison and compare these people on their output and nothing more. Not your perception of the number of hours they're putting in, not any other perception of, just the output, right? What are their their capabilities and their output, and base it solely on that, because that's what benefits you as the manager, by the way, right? Is what they're actually delivering and bringing to the table, and how good they are to the department, and yeah, they're delivering. So, but it's hard, and we're people, and I can absolutely understand how hard that can be, because I have been a manager and I know how the challenges of assessing people, because they're people and I'm a people. I'm a people, and you know, I make these mistakes, and I have made those mistakes in assessing you know, people. Absolutely. So I get it. And I'm a realist. So I don't think there is a magic bullet here. So I guess my advice is we should just understand that there will be some differences. Because just think about, like, have you ever been been on the phone, you know, or on the virtual side of being that virtual employee, and everyone else meetings is in person? You ever been that person? It's awful. It's awful. You are not being heard. You are not being heard. Okay, I've been there.
You're on that little the gray thing in the middle of the desk.
The Polycom. Yep. You're on the Polycom. You are a gray entity of nothingness. And that's awful.
Yeah.
Awful.
But I think you touched on a good point that I wanted to emphasize. I think that's why it's important when you're in an organization, you have a clear career ladder. What are the expectations for what the skills are for the level the person's at? What are those skills they need to demonstrate for the next level? What are those measurable outputs that you're looking for? That way, I don't care how many hours you work. Like, if you're delivering on the work, if you're delivering on the output of someone at the next level, if you're demonstrating the skills of someone at the next level, I don't care if we went for drinks or not. Like, if you're showing me by your work, I don't care how you got there. I care that, oh, look, they're demonstrating. I think it's sometimes harder to evaluate when it's remote, or you might not have some of that language, that more informal language you get from just being in person. So it might be harder to kind of tease out. But I usually put that more on the manager. But again, I do concede, Jordan, that we are human. So I'll concede on that point. I don't know. Anyone else want to add to this one?
Of course, I'll add something to that, Jeremy. So I think that is a very interesting thing, and this will be a little ambitious of me to say, but it's understandable. The skill isn't like balanced, just like we can realistically look at it. But I want to believe maybe that is where we are heading as a world. Basically, I'm not saying we are heading to full remote, etc. But I think we are yet to see more of the value that the hybrid and remote environment work will be bringing to the industry. And I think when that time gets there, every person working remote and hybrid will be actually given what is deserved of them. Yeah.
I think one sort of tag out for me is that on-sites and off-sites are super valuable. I mean, all what you save in, you know, having to pay for a lease, the company should spend to occasionally get the team together. You know, we used to do this with at Modus with the executive leadership team, but also, you know, we try to do it with the product team and just get everyone in a room, and, you know, those connections. It's good to meet people face to face and have that time to sort of strategize. And you can go a long way.
Yeah, I was reading some of Nick's Sterling. The font's a little small on that screen, so if I'm reading your last name, I apologize. So Nick's talking about one-on-one non-work connections. Like, I know I would do that sometimes, do one-on-one meetings, but where there wasn't an agenda, or in other words, those things that I was always sure Jordan would never show up to. But so I don't know. Nick's made a whole bunch of comments. Anyone wanted to weigh in on any of them, in addition to what I did?
Oh yeah, I think the one-on-one on the work connections, actually it's a culture I intentionally do, not as part of the work, but to sort of create that team bonding basically. And I think it's crucial sometimes. I sometimes want to hear something that is not about work, and it gives me an insight to the person, the human I'm actually working with. So I just sometimes, randomly do some of those, work just to also, get me that other level of insight to operate. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else
Yeah,
have anything they want to add?
yeah. On those things, like I think that cultural piece is tough to replace. Because you want your meetings to be like we were talking about earlier. You want them to be productive and well formed and agended. But by the same token, like how do you have those how do you create those connections without it being like stilted and awkward and weird? And it's tough.
Sounds like all my connections. The in-person ones.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've seen done is having like a weekly happy hour, and it just like a co-working. So, and then they would take turns having like one of the founders of this company that I had done this with. They were DJs, so they would always spin some tunes, and people would just kind of hang out like on a Zoom call, and you could just talk or not, or you could just work. And I've seen other things where people do things like that, where you can work together, but like in silence, or you can have a conversation, or it's just kind of almost like just working in the sort of open area if you're at work, so everyone's kind of working, but you can have conversations. And I think trying to do that kind of stuff is worthwhile. Because there's nothing to lose really from it, and it does sort of create those connections, and you get people that are from different areas that come in and can chat.
Yeah, Nick asked a question about like should you actively build your your organization around remote for everyone or not? And it is an interesting question, and perhaps I'm thinking about that, and I think my answer is probably that would make sense. Like if you're going to build a company, you probably want to primarily make it either all or none, I would imagine. Just, again, leveling the playing field, right? I feel like it might be hard if half and half, like half your people are always in the office and the other half aren't. Could be hard for that half that's not. I've seen it. I've worked for companies where there was both, people that were in the office all the time and people that were in the office never. So it's doable. But I also saw that there was a challenge there. But the one thing that I thought was interestingly, and it wasn't like discussed, but was unwittingly respectful, was when there was a meeting and there were going to be remote people on that meeting. All the people that were in office would actually not come together into a conference room. They'd stay at their desks and take the meeting from their desks. And the nice thing, the reason why that was good is because it avoided that thing I was talking about earlier, where like all the people would be sitting at a conference room with like that Polycom problem, where all the people that were remote would feel ignored, because all you have is that like the four people together would be talking to each other and completely ignoring all the remote people. Would not happen. That because everyone was just two-dimensional, right? Looking at a screen, there was some level of equality on those meetings because everyone was on a screen, even though some people were in office. It didn't make the people that were remote feel at all left out because everyone was two-dimensional in those meetings. And I felt that actually made a lot of sense for the people that were not in the office, and that worked and helped a lot. And it was never something that was discussed. It was just how like it worked. But if I also noticed that if everyone in that was in the meeting was in office, then we would get together and go to a conference room and be together, which made sense, right? Like if everyone is in office, why would you do that? Okay, on a screen. Let's all go to a conference room, take advantage of the fact that we're all physically in the office and talk it out in person. That makes sense, right? So that model, if you have that situation, totally worked well. But back to the point, I think if you're architecting a company from scratch, maybe it does make sense to be all or none for equality purposes. So it's a fair question about what to do.
Yeah, I think it's also a bit of a function of the types of managers you have, the skill sets of the people that you've kind of cobbled together as well. LinkedIn user says pick up the phone and
Old
give them a
school. I
chat.
like it.
I know.
Oh,
Gotta figure out what this phone thing is. Yeah, I'm pretending I'm young. So we're going to wrap this topic up here. A lot of great comments and questions coming in from the audience, so I really appreciate that. We're going to go over to the trivia question. And so for anyone who may have forgotten the trivia, here it is one more time. The role of product manager was first introduced at what company? Once again, the role of product manager was first introduced at what company? And for bonus points, what year? All right, so if anyone gets the year, man, those are going to be some big bonus points there. I don't know what you do with these bonus points, by the way. I haven't figured that out. The role of product manager was first introduced at what company? I'm looking around the room. Jordan, Kelvin, Drew. What do we got?
Don't know. I feel like I was told at one point, and I do not remember.
You all were told at one point. I
Yeah.
promise you. I promise you that you were. All right. Let me look in the chat room, see if anyone posted it there. Any answers in the chat? No. And if you're a
I
few
have a
minutes
guess, but
behind,
it's a pure guess.
oh well. What were you saying, Drew?
I mean, I have an idea of where it might have been, but
You can go for it.
it would be a guess. Again, I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to say something.
No, there's no
either
spoiling
wrong.
anymore. This is that moment. Give the
All right.
answer.
Google.
No.
No, it's not Google.
No.
Hmm.
They just ads.
It must have been in the early aughts, right? It must have been like 2003, 2004.
Probably before then.
Wow.
I'd
Interesting.
say,
You think?
earlier.
Interesting.
IBM.
All right. I'm gonna give you. I'll give you the answer. I'll give you the answer. The long one. We'll get to it in the long way. So looking back to the 1980s, Microsoft is often credited with introducing the modern product manager role. They were called program managers. You might be familiar with that. They were distinct from project managers and engineers. They owned roadmaps, customer insights, feature specs, collaborating with engineering. They were expected to make the trade-offs and own outcomes, not just execution. And they worked at the intersection of engineering, business, and UX. And so they were seen as really the originators of the modern product management role. An earlier prototype of product manager could be found in the kind of the 40s, the 60s over at HP. They had product general managers. They owned the P&L, product development, business strategy. However, in a famous internal memo written by Neil McElroy, I'm hoping I didn't just butcher that, but let's just move on. He called for a brand man, someone responsible for a product's performance, marketing, and overall strategy to ensure end-to-end ownership of products. They referred to them as brands, to drive better accountability, customer focus, performance. And this really laid the important foundations for the disciplines of product management at Procter & Gamble and beyond. So the answer is Procter & Gamble. And the year? Anyone want to guess?
I think the 19
P&G.
30 and 30s.
What'd you say?
I mean, early 30s. I'm not sure about the 30s, but 30s are about.
You said 1930s?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. 1931.
Wow.
Oh.
1931. So, Drew, you were close. So with that said, everyone, so that's someone said IBM 1972. And so, yeah, I can't tell if it's the same person. On my side, it just says LinkedIn user. I hope that's not your actual name. That's just awkward.
I think LinkedIn doesn't pass it through to
That's
StreamYard.
a bummer. Anyway, so with that said, I just thought we'd kind of go around, see if anyone has any final comments, observations, and I'm just going to go with in the order that I see everyone on the screen. So, Drew, any kind of final comments, observations, anything that you're doing you want people to know about? How can people get in touch with you, etc.?
Yeah, well, I'll share that I just launched a course yesterday on LinkedIn for it's AI for product designers. So feel free to check it out. There's if you look in my feed, there's a shared link, and that should give you free access, so you can check it out. So I'll recommend that.
Send the link afterwards. I'll get it in the show description as well.
Okay, all right, I'll do that.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's
Kelvin.
right. Enjoy chatting. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Sorry, Drew, going back to you. What else is
No, I was just saying, other than that, thanks for having me. I enjoyed being here and appreciate it, Jeremy.
Awesome. Kelvin, you've got the floor.
All right. I think with everything we discussed today, this was very educative, and I think we should be very mindful of the products we create, as because they do not just solve problems. I think they shape our perceptions, influence our decisions as humans, and it also redefines how we interact with the world. And I want to believe every decision contributes to someone's experience, either our customer, either our buyer, our user, or whatever it is. It contributes to an experience. So, as innovators, I believe this is a lot of power and responsibility, and we should embrace it with some empathy and curiosity to keep learning, basically. And hey, if you ever working through products or technical challenge, or you are stuck, just feel free to chat me on LinkedIn. I'm always open to discuss. Yeah.
Great. And Jordan?
Yeah, not usually into self-promotion, but I will take this opportunity because now that I'm consulting, I'll put it out there that if there's anybody out there that is in need of part-time head of product, VP of product, CPO level work, especially if it's in a part-time nature. I know that some companies, need fractional work and can only afford fractional work right now. Reach out to me. You could find me at Jordan B at jsbconsultinginc.com. You could be quite useful, especially if you're B2B organization. That's my specialty. I've been doing that for my entire career, 25 years of that stuff. So feel free to reach out to me, hit me up, and let's talk.
Outstanding. So I really want to thank everyone, the great comments, the great questions from what I'd like to call the off-camera part of our roundtable. It was really awesome engagement, and it's really what makes TPG Live unique. Our audience, our people on camera, people off camera. Really, thank you so much. And again, a special thank you to our on-camera roundtable, Jordan Bertram, Kevin Wilson, Drew Falkman. You guys were awesome. I think people have really had an opportunity to learn a lot from you today. And just I've been taking notes, everything from the criticality of really focusing on value. Making sure you're leveraging sales in the process, especially on the enterprise side, creating customer panels and advisory boards. And there's Lovable and Strella coming up again. So this is not a new topic for us. And then in hybrid, it's tricky. There's a lot of, I think you have to accept that everyone's human in the process. And I think people will always do their best, but if you're working in a hybrid environment, you have to accept that there's probably going to be some drawbacks, and you're going to have. There's a lot of tools though that you can implement to try to level that field. Before we fully wrap up, if you'd like to join the roundtable, you can email me over at jhorn@theproductguy.com. If you've got a strong opinion wherever you are in the world, every kind of person, background, everything is welcome. So I really trying to put together a lot of diverse perspectives here on the roundtable. So if you're interested, you can definitely contact me at jhorn@theproductguy.com. And also, we're always looking for, we're always kind of figuring out what our new topics are going to be for future roundtables. So if you have other topics you'd like us to cover, let me know in the comments below, and we can see about getting them going on in a future episode. I'd also say that if you you can really do me a favor, you can do other people who support what we do here on The Product Way, on TPG Live, on the product group, etc. Just a favor to ask: if you're still here, like the video, subscribe, enable notifications, really help spread the word. Tell 5 of your friends about the TPG Live podcast, the Product Way YouTube channel. We have really great content coming out every week, usually multiple videos every week, new bits here and there. And then on the Patreon, we have even more. So definitely check out everything that we're doing. And I think you'll get a lot out of it. And really just thanks again to both the on-camera and off-camera roundtables here for your wisdom, for the conversation. And I'll really see y'all next time at the next TPG Live. Thanks for tuning in. Just one more time, I want to share how you can support this show and gain access to exclusive career-changing resources. For less than the cost of your daily coffee, you'll unlock actionable product management strategies and case studies, proven solutions to real-world challenges, all delivered ad-free. Want to take it up a notch? At $15 a month, you'll get a personal shout-out in an episode and your name in the credits, a great way to showcase your support for our global product management community. For $25 a month, you'll gain priority access to exclusive events, detailed case studies, one-on-one resume feedback, and toolkits tailored to enhance your product management expertise. If you're ready to go all in, subscribe as a product leader and enjoy personalized mentorship sessions and exclusive insights to elevate your career to the next level. Your support makes it possible for us to keep delivering insightful content and building this amazing community of product professionals. So please, head to patreon.com/theproductway and choose the level that's right for you. Every contribution, big or small, makes a huge difference. Thank you so very much for your support.